What's good guys, my name is Nikitin and you're watching No Limit Zone and my tech kitchen, and today I have a review of the Sony a7c. I have a separate video right here with all in-depth techie geeky things, but today I'm gonna be comparing this full frame Sony camera with the Sony a6300 with the same body and with the Sony a7s III. So let's go. Let's start with the size and weight. Without the lens, this is a very lightweight camera and it's very compact. Look at this size comparison with the Sony a6300. Still, the a6300 is a little bit lighter and a little bit smaller, but this is a very compact camera for the full frame. Actually, the smallest in the world as far as I know. At least Sony claims that. So this camera is a great second camera for your main camera. The only thing that lacks in here is 10-bit codec, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. So now let's talk about the build quality and ergonomics. It's a very nicely built camera, but it has not too many buttons. So we have here not a lot of buttons, but we have our function menu. We can select something that we truly need in here. Also, you can set the record button to be this shutter button. When you press it, it starts recording video, and you can reassign this button to be a magnifier, for instance, for helping you out when you're manually focusing. And also you can select something like a clear image zoom right here. You can select to be the Super 35 mode when you press it down, for instance, the audio levels when you press left, for instance, and so on. So it's not bad. There is only two dials. This dial is for your shutter, this dial is for your aperture, and your ISO is changing by pressing right, and you simply scroll through your ISO values. So it's okay for the second camera, and even for the first camera if you get used to it and you set all the menus in your function menu correctly. The menu is still the old one, it's not touchscreen available. The touchscreen is used only for a tracking feature when you're trying to track someone when focusing. And by the way, it has the same focusing speed and focusing sensitivity settings as the Sony a7s III. The previous cameras in such body didn't have this function, but right now it's just the same as in the higher model. The battery is here, it's the Z-type battery, which lasts for around 2 hours of recording 4K footage, even longer than my Sony a7s III, because it takes less, processing power to process the 4K from this camera, because it's only 8 bits and it has the lower bitrate, so it's lasting for a very long time, and it's great that they have implemented this bigger battery to this smaller size. So now let's talk about the doors and the ports. Here we have our audio input, the mini jack 3.5mm, only one SD card slot, which is okay, but I'll talk about it a little bit later. Also here we have our HDMI, which is not a full-size HDMI and it's a pain to use. Also we have our headphones jack, which is nice, and the USB Type-C charging port. It charges pretty fast, so it's a good thing to have. So guys, here I have the 24 megapixel Nikon D780 with the 24-70 f2.8 without the steady shot inside lens, and it's a very heavy setup. It's even heavy to hold. And this is the a7c with the 24-70 f4 with IS built into the lens, optical steady shot they call it, and you can see that it's a dramatic difference in size and especially weight of those two cameras, but they can produce the same image quality in terms of photos and even the better video quality in terms of this Sony camera, because it downsamples the 6K footage to 4K. It's very impressive, guys, how Sony was able to squish and squeeze down all of those settings inside of this tiny body. So guys, I've made a ton of tests and comparisons of this camera with my Sony a7s III, and the first test is for the detail and sharpness in 4K. As you know, this camera downsamples the 6K footage to 4K, and it kind of provides you a better results overall in terms of detail, in terms of sharpness. And I went to Red Square on a sunny day but a very cold day, and I have compared both cameras in 4K mode, and actually the difference is not that big. Yeah, the image from the a7c is a tad sharper, a little bit crispier, but it's not a dramatic difference. And even on my 5K iMac display, I wasn't able to tell the difference, like this is it and this is that. If I didn't write down the names of those cameras, you won't be able to tell this. But it's still nice to have the 6K downsample footage from this camera for wider shots. For instance, if you shoot an interview, you can set it to be a wider shot, and the a7s III and the other camera to be a little bit tighter shots, so you can crop in a little bit to still have those details in the shot. Yeah. Yo. Flexing. The next test and comparison was about the rolling shutter. I have compared it to the Sony a7s III, which is known for being a almost perfect camera in terms of the rolling shutter performance, and it has a very small rolling shutter effect when you whip pan and doing all that stuff, but this camera is still struggling with the rolling shutter. So my piece of advice is not to whip pan with this camera and try to make your footage as stable as possible with it. So I was testing the crop mode, the Super 35 mode, and it was a little bit better, but still, much worse than the Sony a7s III overall. And now let's talk about autofocusing capabilities of this camera. This has the same exact settings for the AF speed and AF sensitivity, and it's working very nicely. I was testing it together with the Sigma MC11 adapter with Sigma 18-35 f1.8 in the Super 35 mode, and it was performing really well for a non-native lens. And then I was testing and comparing it together with the Sony a7s III with the same lenses, the same apertures, the same focusing speed and sensitivity set to maximum, and it was performing really good. The a7s III is a little bit better, you can see this while I'm scrolling frame by frame, but still the a7c has the awesome and outstanding autofocus, which is totally on par, and you can use it in a professional shoot for sure. And now about the color science. Sony claims that it has a newer color science, but it's not on par with the Sony a7s III for sure, because it has the 10-bit codec and this is only an 8-bit codec, but still it has a better colors than the Sony a7s II, for instance, and I'm not claiming about the colors, they are okay, and if you know how to work with the footage, you'll be able to push and pull the image a little bit and get the colors that you want. The area where the Sony a7C does not compare to the Sony a7s III is the IBIS system. The IBIS is here inside of this little body, but it has not enough room to move around the sensor right here. That is why the IBIS is not very well working. It's kind of, a7s II level or a little bit worse. So I've tested the different modes and lenses. At first I tried the 24-70 f4 with optical steady shot built into the lens together with the Sony a7C. Please read the small words down the picture. And it was performing not so well, but when I tried the same lens together with the active steady shot on the Sony a7s III, it was acting like a steady cam or a gimbal like. So when you use the a7C together with the lens with optical steady shot, it's okay. But if the lens does not have the optical steady shot built in, the steady shot is actually not doing much to the footage. So it's a great addition to reduce the micro jitter, for instance, but it's not acting like the GH5's IBIS system or the a7s III's active steady shot at all. I would give it 3 points out of 10. And now about the photo capabilities. I'm not a professional photographer for sure. My girlfriend is, and she was trying to shoot some portraits together with this camera, very big one, very heavy one, and using the 85mm from Nikon, and I was using the 85mm Batis f1.8 on this camera, and here are the sample photos, the portraits. I'm very satisfied with the result, and also here's the comparison of the detail: 24 megapixel from the Sony a7C and 12 megapixel from the Sony a7s III. When we punch in, we see the difference in megapixels, but it's not dramatic actually. Yeah, it does have some difference. If you're not pixel peeping and not zooming in, the 12 megapixels are okay. The low light performance. I took this camera to my trip to St. Petersburg, and I have some shots of the night St. Petersburg city. It's not the best shots, you know, not the most beautiful places of St. Petersburg, but still you can see that the S-Log2 from this camera can be graded pretty nicely, and the picture quality and the noise is pretty fine and okay. And we have a separate video right here, which is the comparison of the Sony a7 III. So the a7c is a shrinked down version of a7 III with improved autofocus, and you can definitely see the results right there and implement those results to low light performance of this camera. It's a very good performance actually. I'm very sure that you can shoot in pretty dark situations, especially with a fast lens like I was using the 35 f1.8 lens. So enjoy the footage, and as I can tell, that's a great and capable low light camera as well. The APS-C crop mode. I hit one button and I punch in a little bit without losing the picture quality, as you can see. So it's a great feature because you can use your APS-C lenses, like I've mentioned, the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8, or you can punch in a little bit in 4K, which you cannot do on the Sony a7S III because it has not enough megapixels in it. And it's a great feature to have. I really miss this feature on the Sony a7S III. It would be nice to have kind of a dual lens setup. 100mm can be 150, which is great. So a big bonus for this camera, for this crop mode. And still, this camera has only one SD card slot, which is not appropriate for the professional work, because the Sony a7 III has 2 card slots and you can basically record your video onto both cards simultaneously, which is a good thing. So if you're buying this camera to be a second camera or your vlog camera, it's a great choice. But if you are trying to be a professional, I suggest recording onto both cards for redundancy, and this is not the best option here. And I wish Sony one day will implement 10-bit in this form factor, and this will be just great and awesome. And maybe this year the Sony will give us one more 10-bit camera, for instance the Sony a7 IV, which would be very nice because I really want 10 bits in my second camera. So will I buy this one as a second or third camera? Actually no, I'm looking at the Sony a6400 to replace my Sony a6300 to be a top-down camera. So this camera right here is great, but I can't see what I'm shooting and it's overheating. So I'm able only to record onto this camera in 1080p, which is not the best 1080p actually. So I'm looking at the a6400, or I'll be waiting for another 10-bit camera from Sony. And what do you think, guys? Which camera is the best second camera for the Sony a7S III? By the way, I have a separate video discussing the the best second camera for the Sony a7S III. You can check it right here. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of this camera? How do you compare it to the Sony a7 III, a much older camera? What do you think of the form factor? What do you think of the capabilities of the rolling shutter? All that stuff, please, your thoughts down in the comment section below. And if you did like the content on my channel, please smash the like and subscribe buttons, as I say in my videos, and the notifications bell. I highly appreciate it, guys. От души, as we Russian people say, from the soul, from the deepest corners of our soul. Big Russian soul. Good footage from Red Square for today's video, guys. So guys, that's been it. This was Oleg Nikitin, No Limit Son, and my tech kitchen, and I see you in the next video. Take care. Bye. In the Super 35 mode.